On a sunny morning in Sarajevo, a shot rang out. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated. This act of violence, committed by a Serbian nationalist on June 28, 1914, set off a chain reaction that plunged Europe into the deadliest conflict the world had ever seen. Austria-Hungary, blaming Serbia for the assassination, issued an ultimatum with harsh demands. Serbia, backed by Russia, refused to comply fully. This diplomatic standoff quickly escalated. Alliances long in place were activated. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia. France, bound by treaty to Russia, mobilized its troops. When Germany invaded neutral Belgium to attack France, Great Britain declared war on Germany. Within weeks, the great powers of Europe were at war. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand was the spark, but the underlying causes of the war were more complex. Nationalism, imperialism and militarism had been building for decades, creating a climate of suspicion and hostility among the European powers. The assassination ignited these tensions, leading to a global conflict. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand fractured Europe into two main alliances. On one side were the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and later the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. These nations shared geographic proximity, economic ties, and a common fear of their rivals. On the other side stood the Allied powers, initially consisting of France, Russia, and Great Britain. Italy, despite having a treaty with Germany and Austria-Hungary, joined the Allied side in 1915. Japan, seeking to expand its influence in Asia, also joined the Allied cause. The United States, initially neutral, entered the war in 1917 on the side of the Allies. This decision, influenced by German submarine attacks on American ships and the desire to protect democracy, would prove decisive in the war's outcome. The alliances created a complex web of obligations and rivalries. Each nation entered the war with its own goals and ambitions, making the conflict a truly global struggle for power and dominance. World War I was characterized by brutal battles and prolonged periods of stalemate. On the Western Front, a line of trenches stretched for hundreds of miles across France and Belgium. Here, millions of soldiers faced each other in a deadly struggle for every inch of ground. The Battle of the Marne in 1914 halted the German advance on Paris, but marked the beginning of trench warfare. The Battle of Verdun in 1916 became a symbol of the war's brutality, with hundreds of thousands of casualties on both sides. The Battle of the Somme, also in 1916, saw the British Army suffer its bloodiest day in history. On the Eastern Front, the war was more fluid, with vast armies clashing across the plains of Eastern Europe. Russia, despite its massive size and population, suffered heavy losses against Germany and Austria-Hungary. The Battle of Tannenberg in 1914 was a crushing defeat for Russia, while the Brusilov offensive in 1916 achieved significant gains, but at a terrible cost. These battles and countless others resulted in millions of casualties and had a profound impact on the course of the war. They also led to the development of new military technologies and tactics, as each side sought an advantage over the other. Section 4. New Weapons of War. World War I witnessed the introduction of new and deadly weapons that transformed warfare. Machine guns, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, mowed down attacking soldiers. Artillery, more powerful and accurate than ever before, rained down shells on enemy positions, creating a landscape of craters and destruction. Poison gas, first used by the Germans in 1915, added a new dimension of horror to the battlefield. Chlorine gas, mustard gas, and other chemical weapons caused blindness, severe burns, and agonizing deaths. Soldiers on both sides were forced to wear gas masks for protection, adding to the misery of life in the trenches. Tanks, first deployed by the British in 1916, offered some hope of breaking the stalemate of trench warfare. These armoured vehicles, armed with cannons and machine guns, could cross no man's land and crush barbed wire defences. However, early tanks were slow, unreliable, and vulnerable to artillery fire. The airplane, still in its infancy, found a new role in warfare. Initially used for reconnaissance, airplanes were soon equipped with machine guns and bombs, becoming tools of aerial combat and strategic bombing. The dogfights between fighter planes captured the imagination of the public, creating heroes like Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron. Section 5. Life and death in the trenches. For the millions of soldiers who fought on the Western Front, life was a nightmare of mud, blood, and constant danger. The trenches, dug to protect soldiers from enemy fire, became their homes for months, even years at a time. Life in the trenches was a constant test of endurance. The trenches themselves were often waterlogged and infested with rats and lice. Disease was rampant. Soldiers suffered from trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to damp and cold. The constant shelling and threat of enemy attack created a climate of fear and tension. Attacks were often preceded by artillery barrages that could last for hours, even days. Soldiers huddled in their dugouts, praying to survive the bombardment. When the order came, they would go over the top, charging across no man's land towards the enemy trenches. Many were cut down by machine gun fire or blown apart by artillery. Those who reached the enemy lines faced hand-to-hand combat with bayonets and grenades. The fighting was brutal and often indecisive, resulting in heavy casualties for little gain. Section 6. A world transformed by war. World War I ended on November 11, 1918, with the signing of the armistice. Germany, exhausted and facing defeat, agreed to a ceasefire. The war had lasted for 4 long years and claimed the lives of millions. The world would never be the same. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war but sowed the seeds of future conflict. Germany, blamed for the war, was forced to accept harsh punishments, including territorial losses, disarmament, and crippling reparations payments. These terms fueled resentment and instability in Germany, contributing to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party 2 decades later. The war's impact extended far beyond Europe. The Ottoman Empire, defeated alongside the Central Powers, was dismantled. New nations emerged from the ruins of empires, redrawing the map of Europe and the Middle East. The war also accelerated social change, challenging traditional gender roles as women took on new responsibilities in the workforce and society. World War I was a watershed moment in human history. It shattered empires, reshaped the global order, and left an enduring legacy of trauma and loss. The war's horrors also inspired calls for peace and international cooperation, leading to the creation of the League of Nations, the forerunner to the United Nations. The lessons of World War I continue to resonate today, reminding us of the devastating costs of conflict and the importance of diplomacy and understanding in a complex world.